everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome to So What, the Marketing Analytics and Insights Live Show. I'm joined by both Chris and John through the miracle
Hello.
of space and time. Chris just got off a plane. John has internet, and we're all here. So it's
Yeah.
perfect. This week, we are talking about how to prompt agentic AI. So everyone's talking about AI. Everyone's talking about AI agents, building your own, army of robots. All that stuff is great. Not if you don't know how to talk to them and tell them exactly what it is you need them to do. So this week, and Chris, I know you ran an experiment over the weekend, which I was just looking at, and unsurprisingly, I have questions. Um, but I'll save them so I don't get ahead of us. But before we get into how to prompt agentic AI, do you want to sort of set the stage for what it is we're even looking at?
Sure. So, and I apologize. I've had like 2 hours of sleep entirely. So, if this comes out as garbled delirium, just let us know in the comments.
It's what John and I are here for. We're just the comic relief, and we'll just keep the show moving when Chris
Guardrails.
just kind of keels over. We'll be like, "Hey, so did you catch the news today?"
Um, if we think of an AI model as an engine, GPT 5.3, the brand new GLM 5 that came out yesterday, right in the middle of my workshop. I was like, oh yeah, and GLM 4.7 is the latest model. Never mind. Gotta change that slide. Like literally, it dropped in the middle of the workshop, which was hilarious. Claude Opus 4.6. These are models. Models are the engines of AI, and the way that we've been using them for the last 2 or 3 years is inside a model harness, an interface like ChatGPT or Google Gemini or Claude, by the way, funny enough, folks who are native French speakers pronounce it totally different. They call it Claude, and during the workshop, I was like, "Who? Oh, Claude." Yeah. They provided these web interfaces with a lot of back end stuff like safety rules and things, and that's how we come to use AI. We've come to use it to you open up ChatGPT, you talk to it, it does stuff, and then you copy paste and you go on about your day. Agentic AI is all about saying, well, you've got this great engine. What about the rest of the car? Maybe I don't want to be the copy paste monkey. Maybe a lot of people have been talking about how there's no ROI of AI, depending on which study you read. And a good part of that is because, yeah, if you are just in vanilla ChatGPT and you're copying and pasting everything in and out of course you're not going to get any like massive savings because you're still the bottleneck. Agentic AI is when you say, okay, let's take the engine, build the rest of the car around it, and connect it to things. So let's connect it to our Google Workspace so it can read my Gmail, my calendar. Let's connect it to Asana, our task management system. Let's connect it to HubSpot, our CRM, and let's give it a different interface where now it has more autonomy. You could say, pull the last 20 opportunities from HubSpot and tell me how well they fit our ideal customer profile. And as long as you've provided the pieces, the model harness that you're using, like a Claude Code or a Claude Cowork or Google Anti-Gravity, can say, yep, I'll go and do that. I'll come right back and tell you what I found. So that's the difference between the AI that we've been using from 2023 to 2025 and the AI today of 2026.
Okay. So when we first started talking about generative AI, we were giving examples of best practices for prompting. We have things like the Repel framework, which you can get at trustinsights.ai/repel. We have things like the RACE framework, role, action, context, execution, the basics. And obviously, as the technology becomes more sophisticated, the way we need to think about interacting with it becomes more sophisticated. So, the point of today's episode is how to prompt agentic AI. So, do the frameworks that we educate people on, such as RACE and Repel and PAIR and, pick an acronym, are those still applicable or have things changed? Like, what do we need to know today?
So Andre Karpathy, the co-founder of OpenAI, said in 2023 the hottest programming language was English, right? In 2026, the hottest programming language is project management skills. Because when you are prompting agentic AI, you are no longer giving step-by-step individual instructions to a machine. You are instead giving the machine a plan. You are giving it a project, a PRD, a requirements document, something along those lines that it can autonomously pick up, run with, and go and do something with. So, for example, I'm going to use this from this week's workshop that I just got back from doing. This is the world famous Gopher Hole Museum in Torrington, Alberta, which is a museum of 45 dioramas of gophers in common Alberta life. It's this cute little place. It's about an hour north of Calgary, and I think it's literally like a one-person show. And they're only open during the summer.
I was going to say, I'm not going to lie, I would totally be down to go visit that. That
Oh,
sounds
totally.
awesome.
Totally. And I said, this is part of the talk, was to say, static content like a standard web page is very vulnerable to AI overviews and to AI replacement and search, because you don't need to go to their website anymore, which means that the website owner loses the ability to try and convert a visitor, because you don't get the visitor anymore. So I said, what would it look like if we had an agentic system like Claude Code take a shot at making something interactive that AI can't summarize, that AI can't take away from us, because it would be something kind of fun instead of just a static page. Not that there's anything wrong with a static page. And so I had to sit down and think, how would I do that in an agentic way? And the single best framework for doing that today, for prompting agentic AI, huge surprise, is the 5P framework. And here's why. Because the 5P framework contains all the ingredients that an AI agent would need to do the task. So what is the purpose? What do you want to do? We've got a static website that AI can take traffic away. We need something interactive and dynamic that can't be summarized. And the purpose of all that is to keep the traffic we get to our website. And also, because this is a tourist attraction that has a season, they need to somehow raise revenue in the off season when they're not open, because the bills don't stop when the season stops. So that's the purpose. The people involved would be people like me, who would be using agentic AI and directing. And by the way, this is a really critical part. Today's agentic tools, this just came out a week ago, I think, in Claude Code. You can now create virtual teams of people inside there. So you would say, I need a UI designer, UX designer, a gamification expert. I need an SEO expert. I need a project manager. And you would specify in your project plan, based on the 5 Ps, here's the virtual people who belong on this project. The process is how you want to approach this, to say, let's first gather the team, do some brainstorming. What are some ways that we could come up with that would be interactive, that would give people a reason to come to this website, maybe even give a reason to donate to the website? That would be kind of fun, to drive revenue in the off season and preserve their traffic. The platform is something that you would likely have the agents partially designed. So you have some conversation, just like you would in requirements gathering. Say, well, it's got to be something lightweight. It can't be this company clearly does not have the resources for a massive server farm. So it's got to be something lightweight, client side, super easy, super non-technical. So IT agent, what do you think? Give us all this some choices. And then the performance is, can you actually build the thing? And when you're done building the thing, does it work? Right? Does it meet those requirements? So I sat down, and I was doing this on the plane ride to Alberta on Sunday, and I wrote it out at like the 5 Ps, and I gave it to Claude Code. We went back and forth and had the conversation for about 15 minutes. And then I said, go, off you go. And it spun up the agent teams. And what came up at the end of it all, I'm going to share my screen here. We're going to go to trustinsights.ai/interactives/Taya/Gopher. This is hosted on our website, Katie.
Oh boy. You know I love surprises, Chris.
Yes. But it consumes no resources because we put it on all the things on the client side. You can choose your diorama that you want, then pick the gopher that you would like to add to the diorama, give it some cute outfits like a Royal Mounties uniform here. Let's make that a little bit bigger. And then maybe give it a prop like a broom. I don't know why you'd be doing that to play billiards. But you'll notice at the bottom here is a button that says you can order a print that would tie into the Gelato API, which is a print-on-demand shop. And they allow a company like the Gopher Hole Museum to essentially be an affiliate. So if someone wanted to make their little diorama, the kids made this cute little diorama, and they hit order print, the museum would get like $2 off the $8 print. And then there's also the way to visit the museum itself, get the gift shop, do the donate and stuff like that. And all of this came together in about 45 minutes. However, it needed the 5P framework as an agentic prompt to pull it off, because when the two bookends are the most important. If you specify the purpose and you specify the performance and tell an agentic system, here's what success looks like, it will figure out most of the rest.
So I love this, obviously, for obvious reasons, but no, I love it because it really does show the flexibility of the 5P framework. And I was actually having a conversation with Kelsey, our account manager, the other day, and one of the things she mentioned was, what if I don't know all of the P's of the 5P framework? And I said, that's okay. Because one of the things that this framework is meant to do is to highlight where you don't have enough information so that you can go get it before you start building things and, racking up bills and pressing buttons and getting your CEO chasing you going, why do I suddenly have a $5,000 bill for something that you don't even have an output for? And so I really appreciate that you feel like the 5P framework is the right framework here because, to your point, like you knew a lot of information going in. You knew what you were after, but you probably iterated with Claude Code and said, I have a lot of information. I maybe don't have all of the information. These are the questions I want to be able to answer. Maybe I don't know who all the people are. This is what I'm thinking of doing. Who are the additional people in my neighborhood? This is what I think I want to do. What is the process? Like, you can use this as an anchor to make sure you have all of that information before you start building something. So I haven't defined my performance. Can you help me figure out what my measure of success is? I know what I want to build. That's my purpose. Like, is that clear? Do I need to refine it? I'm very jazzed about this. And I know that that sort of dates me, but I am, like, jazzed is the word that I think is the most appropriate. Jazzed. My shock and delight.
Even if I have a lot of information, the 5P framework is still important because I don't ever have all of the information. And what I find is happening more and more as I'm doing more advanced projects is the number of blind spots I have is increasing. So I'll give you a very simple example. I wanted to make a new kind of video game, a very simple game, kind of like Wordle. I had this idea and I was like, oh, that'd be cool to create something. And I have this idea that I'm working on. And I was like, well, suggest, here's what I think we might want to do. What don't I know? What technologies in the platform in particular are available? And it said, oh, yeah, there's one technology called Pocketbase. Pocketbase takes a SQLite database and wraps it inside of its own harness to have an API and all this other really cool stuff. I'm like, where the hell has this been for like the last year that I've been making things with SQLite databases? I looked at this and go, this is fantastic. Mm-hmm. In another case, for a client project we were working on, I did a V1 of the project, and at a certain point, I was like, this is just not going well. So I said, let's do a V2. And as part of doing the V2, when we rebooted it, I said, as part of the requirements document, assume that everything I wrote in the requirements document for the V1 is wrong when it comes to platform. what are the best choices now? What's in market now? And it's and one of the things the same it says was, dude, you picked the wrong database. This is not the database. Use this one instead because it also supports vector search. So if you want to eventually be able to use generative AI to understand thematically what's in the database, PostgreSQL with PG Vector will do that, whereas your old choice, you will never support that, and it will also continue to be a costly nightmare. And so even if I think I have the answers, part of the 5P framework for me when we're prompting agentic AI is to say, what are my blind spots? What don't I know in each of the 5Ps? Ask me questions. What portion of the purpose did I not think through? So in the one game example I was talking about, I said, oh, what about this for monetization? And it said, do not do that. That will ruin your game. If you want to monetize it, do it this way instead. I'm like, oh. And so now the purpose and the performance changed based on the conversation I had with with one of the agents. I'm like, oh, that makes for a much better experience. And at the one point the agent said, here is how you can build in like sponsorships in a way that's not like crappy for people who play the game. So if you want to plan for radical success down the road, you don't have to re-engineer a V2. You can plan up front. One of the keys of agentic prompting is you need to spend about 3 times as much planning as you do anything else. Because if you get the plan right and it's solid, you can hand that to the agent and it just goes and does it. And because the plan is specific and detailed and has code snippets in it and has all this and that, it just knocks it out of the park. If your plan sucks, you're going to get a steaming pile of crap.
It's almost like someone has been saying this forever, even before generative AI, upended all of our lives. It's almost like someone has been preaching to an empty room that if you just got your planning straight, you could execute things so much faster. So I am very much relishing the validation of things that I've been saying for years, and I'm taking full credit for being the one who has been yelling to no one. But hopefully now people are listening, because here's the thing. When we were talking about it in terms of like software development or marketing planning execution, everyone sort of felt like, yeah, I know enough about it that I can just kind of wing it. Now, with generative AI and now agentic AI, the stakes are a lot higher, especially where there's a very tangible cost associated with using these tools. Like there's a cost associated with using, marketing operations tools, CRMs, that kind of stuff, but not in the same way that they are with agentic AI tools. And so, and we've talked about how those costs work on previous live streams, which you can get at our playlist at trustinsights.ai/YouTube. Go to the SWOT playlist. All the good stuff is there. Now you have to be really careful, especially when this whole what is the ROI of AI conversation comes into play. You can't be spending a crap ton of money and getting no results. And that's what happens when you don't do your planning. And I am just, I am loving this. This makes me so happy because I'm like, yeah, I know. I know if you have a good plan, you get good results, duh. But in all seriousness, I'm really grateful that the 5P framework is the foundation. It doesn't matter what the technology is, it's always going to be there for you to fall back on.
Right. And what I would suggest is that within your agent system, no matter what system you're doing it in, you actually build it into the system. So, for example, in my version of Claude Cowork and Claude Code, I actually created a plugin for it, the Trust Insights 5P plugin. And inside is co-CEO Katie to help with it. And then 2 skills, the 5P framework skill and then the fact check skill. And both of those are things that co-CEO Katie uses a lot. So when I say, let's do this thing, co-CEO Katie will be like, okay, I'm going to give this a read through. We're going to force you to think through all parts of the 5Ps. And so you can have that discussion. Or if you really want to go kind of crazy, You could create an agentic version of yourself to talk to the agent version of Katie, and the two of them can debate, and you can come back later and see how things turned out. I do this.
Well, I mean, that doesn't really work for me because I am co-CEO Katie. So like then it would sort of be this weird, like, just as a side note, when I talk to the co-CEO, I'm talking to myself. And I already find that very odd because I'm like, God damn it, I would say that. That is exactly how I feel about this thing. So I'm just sort of, so I got stuck in this like weird visual of like trying to picture like Katie talking to co-CEO Katie and them just like coming to a standstill because they're both stubborn of like, no, I'm saying that. No, I'm saying that. No, I'm saying that. No, I'm saying that. And it's like, okay, can we move on? No, because that's what I'm saying. Sorry. Anyway, that was an aside.
So let's see how you would put this to use. I'm going to specify a folder, and we're going to choose a folder. And just for today, we'll go with, let's see, where's my data diaries? So I'm going to use my data diaries project, which is what I use to edit the data diaries every week in the Trust Insights newsletter. And we're going to say, I'm going to choose the 5P skill here. And I can see we have 5P framework. And I'm going to drop in my recipe, which is the general prompt I use to edit this thing. And then we want to now do it agentically. So we're going to say, using the co-CEO and the 5P framework, help me reformat and rewrite this agentic prompt into the full 5P framework. And to give you a sense of what's in there, it basically says, this is an editing task using the writer agent, the editor agent, and the writing style analysis skills. Review the rough transcript in the input folder and transform it into a polished newsletter piece in the output folder. You'll clean up speech dissonances, bad grammar, read the transcript to understand the logical flow, then use the voice of the customer agent with the ICP provided to ensure that it aligns with the voice of the customer, what the customer would find helpful, and so on and so forth. Dispatch parallel agents and stuff. So that's a very simplistic prompt. We can improve it, and we should improve it, and we're going to improve it with the 5P framework. So let's go ahead and make this just a bit bigger.
Thank you. You can see I'm like, what? Whenever I start, if you see my face down here, it means I can't read the screen.
Yeah, I'm
It's
the
too
same
small.
thing.
Me and John are like, we're gonna clean our glasses.
It says, what I see in the current recipe, it's a rough conversational prompt that mixes goals, tools, processes, and quality standards into a single run-on paragraph, which is completely right. The intent is solid. Transform a rough transcript into a polished newsletter piece, but the structure makes it hard for an AI orchestrator to parse priorities, sequence dependencies, and know what done looks like. Let's now apply the 5P framework with co-CEO rigor to do this. You're working hard, or your virtual version of you is working very hard.
Well, and I appreciate that it's taking a minute because as simplistic as the 5P framework is, you really need to think through what goes into each of the pieces. And it really is an opportunity for you to think through, do I have enough information? I like to think of it as like the full 360 of business requirements, because like you need all of the pieces in order to successfully move forward. You can move forward without any of the pieces, but to your point earlier, you're not going to get the best result. And so based on the prompt that you gave it, I'm assuming that the co-CEO is going to point out that you have some gaps.
Oh, it definitely point out a bunch of the different gaps, and what it's going ahead now in doing is it's just going to go and fix it. It's to say, you know what? Because the original prompt, the intent is pretty clear because it's such a narrow task. Like, take this transcript and make it better, and then validate it against the voice of the customer. That's not something that, this is not a big strategic. This is not a complex piece of code. This is essentially a just an agentic prompt to get the tool to go off and do something and do it intelligently.
Sure.
For larger stuff, yeah, you'll go through rounds, particularly if you're using Claude Code. and you have the superpowers plugin installed, which we talked about a couple weeks ago on the live stream. That will start to invoke with the brainstorming tool. It will start asking you questions and say, like, what about this? What about this? All right. What the original was a single paragraph. What the 5e version delivers: purpose, people, process, platform, performance. Let's take a look and see what it came up with. So the data diaries newsletter production recipe. Purpose: the question we're answering: how to consistently transform a rough voice transcript into a polished educational newsletter piece that meets the Trust Insights brand standard and resonates with our ICP. The problem we're solving: raw transcripts contain speech dissonances, unstructured logic, inconsistent tone, and unverified claims. Left unprocessed, they do not meet the quality bar our audience expects. What success looks like: finished data diaries column that educates our customers on the topic at hand, adheres to our writing style, aligns with our ICP, and contains no unverified claims. The internal stakeholder: here are the AI agents that it has now documented, and then it has the external one. And this contains the character cards that I made from our ICPs. So these are the different, these are yet more named personalities that I use every week, Katie.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because offline you had given me a piece of research you had done, and my first question was like, who are these people? I don't. This report is prepared by this person that I've never heard before. Who is? I'm not paying them. They're not on the payroll. Get out of here.
Yes, they're all synthetic. They're all characters in the trading card game we have built around this. All right. Process, intake, and comprehension. Read the transcripts, read the style guide, read the ICPs and things. Ask the content owner clarifying questions. Do not assume, ask. Clean up the speech disfluencies. Map the logical structure. The what, so what, now what framework, which we love to do. The writing agent goes off and does those things. Then the editor agent goes off and does its things. The voice of the customer comes in and offers their perspective. The fact check skill runs to validate claims made in the piece. And then you get the final output and the parallel execution guidelines. And here's how the different agents have to coordinate together. This is a critical part of agentic prompting. You have to specify the order of operations. Otherwise, agentic tools will either do one of two things. One, they'll run sequentially, which means you save no time because you're waiting from one agent to the next, right? Yes, it will do it autonomously, but it's slow, it's inefficient. Or it'll launch all the agents at once. And you'll have race conditions because they'll be trying, each agent will say, hi, I did my part. And you're like, no, but this part depends on that part. And they both did it at the same time. So they basically kind of hallucinate each other's parts. So part of good agentic prompting is thinking clearly through what is the order of operations that the different agents need to play. Who does what first? Some things can be done in parallel. Here it says phases 4 and 5 can run in parallel if the editor's output is available, but phase 6 runs after 4 and 5. So you can't run phase 6 agent without the previous ones. Here's the platform.
It's like a project plan with dependencies. Who knew?
Exactly.
Crazy.
Here's the platform, the tools required, the platform dependencies, and then how we measure success. Did it comply with the writing style? Would all 5 ICPs find it valuable? Is it factually accurate? Is it complete? Does it have structural integrity? Does asking questions, agent utilization, revision traceability, the definition of done? When are the agent teams done? And then this first principle, which is something that I have embedded in my version of the data diaries. So this now is ready for prime time. So this goes in the data diaries folder instead of me. Let's open this folder up here. Yeah, so you can see it has gone through, and that one paragraph recipe is now a full-fledged recipe that I can now every week say, here's the draft, go. And we know exactly what's going to happen. And when I come back, it'll be done. I will, because the 5P framework creates such rigid, in a good way, rigid definitions of what success and done is. This allows an agent to iteratively go, are we done? Let me check. Nope. Are we done? Let me check. Nope. Are we done? Yes, we're done.
Devil's advocate question. So this, I love this, and because I as someone who is very familiar with the data diaries, I love this kind of extra detail to it because sometimes it kind of feels like a little bit of a rambling, what just happened? And so I love this, but help convince someone who isn't me. Okay, let's convince John. What is the benefit of doing this versus just taking your transcript, which, you know, you are an expert in the stuff you're an expert in, and you create the data diaries on those things. Therefore, it's really just a matter of cleaning up the transcript so that it's a comprehensive blog post, for lack of a better term. Why can't you just say, okay, copy editor, human or virtual, clean up my post so it's more coherent? What is the benefit to doing all of these extra steps versus just having a copy editor clean it up?
So twofold. One thing is that there's extra steps in here that the humans just typically don't assign. So, like the fact check, go and Google every claim that's made in here, do a web search on it, and validate that it's actually true. Your average copy editor is not going to do that. And if our goal is things like accuracy and truthfulness, we should be fact checking. Even if I am an expert in something or I know a lot about something, I can and certainly am still wrong a fair amount of the time. So I want to make sure that we're doing this well. And two, I have biases when I write, when I talk and things like that. I have a point of view, and that's not a bad thing. But the Trust Insights newsletter is not my personal publication. It's the company's. And so the voice of the customer, again, the copy editor, that's not their job. Their job is not to enforce the voice of the customer and say, here is what our customer would think about this. A copy editor's job is to say, wow, dude, you have like the world's longest run on paragraphs here. And so by aligning this with our voice of the customer, we refine it to say, out of this huge ramble, what did Chris say that's actually valuable to our customer?
That's fair. We have a really interesting comment that I would love for you to address. And so this board again sort of goes into the what is the benefit. So we have this viewer who said what you just defined is going to use a lot of tokens. It went from being a $50 project to a $150 project. Like what do you say to that?
You got it backwards. In an agentic framework, in agentic AI, if you give it a crap prompt like the original one, it's going to spend a lot of time trying to infer what you meant. And you could see this in the reasoning traces inside Claude Code in particular. You burn a lot of tokens for the model trying to figure out what it's supposed to be doing, because Opus 4.6, for example, does a lot of that, does a lot of reasoning and judgment. If you have a good detailed project plan up front that clearly specifies here's what success is, you can do two things. One, Opus is going to have a lot fewer debates with itself about like what did the person mean, as opposed to saying I completely understand the plan, now I'm just going to execute it. Two, if the plan is really good and well thought out and it contains the full 5 Ps, you can switch down to a lighter model like Sonnet and save yourself a ton of money, because if you plan with the big model like Opus, because you can see when I was doing this in Claude Cowork, I have Claude Cowork set on Opus 4.6 for any kind of planning. Plan big, act small, which is from last year's book, almost timeless, available for sale. Plan big, act small. Use the smartest model for the plan, but then when it comes to the typing part, you can use a lighter weight model like Sonnet, Claude Sonnet, or Gemini Flash, or GPT 5.3 Medium to actually do the copy pasting and rewriting, as long as the plan is good. So yes, either way, you're going to use a lot of tokens, but the crappy, poorly defined prompt is going to make the model spin a lot more, and you will get less repeatable results. You will get less reliable results, because if I went with that original prompt and I was not specific about what kind of outcomes I wanted, I might get 3 very different formatted columns from the same piece of text. Whereas if I say in the detailed project plan, this is the format I expect, no listicles, no, 28 point bullets, it's prose, it's articles. I want it to be like this. If I do that, I get a repeatable result. And by the way, that cuts down token usage because the model doesn't have to sit there and go, how should I do this? What does the user want? Instead, it goes, I'm going to follow the plan.
And so that is a great segue into Brian's question. Hey, Brian, do you use Claude to create the Agentic project plan and framework and then take that into Claude Code? Or do you have the conversation and make the plan directly in Claude Code?
So me personally, I do everything in Claude Code. Like I live essentially in Claude Code. For the average user who is not technical, doesn't want to fire up a terminal command line, I would suggest you should do the Agentic plan in regular Claude and then execute it in Claude Cowork.
And that's how I typically work so I'm not savvy in Claude Code. I understand enough of it, but I have become best friends with Claude Cowork, and sort of making the plan, here's everything I need to execute. And unsurprisingly, my brain just works in the 5P framework, so I don't even need to really think like, is this how I'm going to structure it? I guess that's the benefit of being the creator of it. But to your point, Chris, you can create the plan and then give it to Agentic. And I think that is the smart way to do it. So you don't need to use Agentic to create the plan, create it in the idea of giving it to, and that can become one of the P's, the platform be like, and this will be run through this platform so that when you're creating the plan is keeping in mind, okay, this is for specifically Claude Cowork, or this is for specifically Claude Code. Yep. John, you have been a nonstop chatterbox this entire episode, so I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah, well, it's still, I don't know, there's not a huge dividing line between straight prompts and calling agents, and then I know it's different for other tools. So that's really what I'm still trying to get my head around is, at which point are agents being invoked and really how is that fundamentally different from just straight prompting?
So that's a good question. Here's how it works, at least in the agentic systems like Google Anti-Gravity, Claude Code, etc. An agent is essentially another copy of the AI, right? So when I say, I want you to spin up an agent team of a UI, UX designer, an SEO expert, a marketing expert, and a project manager, and you kick that off inside like Claude Code, you will see little employees just start popping up on the command line. They each get their own context window with their own working memory, and they work with each other. They also get a little mailbox that they can trade messages back and forth to each other, kind of like the middle school class. But they're essentially 5 more copies of Claude, and each one is tasked with a specific task. They do their tasks, they coordinate with each other, and then they return back to the main window with their results. Think of it. So if you think of like when you're in just Gemini or Chat GPT, that is the main, I would call that, just the AI. When you start using agents, that becomes the orchestration agent or the orchestration window where you are the project manager overseeing the project, and the little employees come in and go, and they come in and say, hey, I did the thing. What do you got for me next? And Claude is the orchestra saying, okay, now you got to go do this. Now you got to go do this. And so it's delegating. You're like the factory floor owner. Claude is like the factory floor manager. The agents are like little employees on the factory floor. Whereas if you're just typing into regular AI, you're basically just talking with one employee as opposed to a team.
And then how about as far as having this stuff running 24/7? I mean, pretty much the use cases we're talking about, you're sitting there hamming around, you wait for stuff to give you results that go forward. But do any of the platforms have anything where you would leave these running and have them going, or is that not part of where we're at?
Sure, you can actually have, depending on the how you want to do it, you can tell Claude, I want you to independently run certain tasks with a scheduler, and you just go off and do them, and just let me know from time to time how it's been working. It requires a bit of knowledge about shell scripting and scheduling on whatever kind of computer you're on. but you can ask Claude how to do that. And then you can say, yeah, I want you to. So for example, if I have a folder on my desktop called Asana that I get my daily briefing from, if I wanted to, I could say to Claude, every weekday, run a script that builds me my daily briefing. And I could have it ready for me. I personally like to ask for it because I also will typically give extra instructions, like, oh, do this and with this. And I forgot about this that was it was in Slack and I forgot to put it on my list. And so I give that feedback. That's my personal working style. But there is a way that you could say, yep, just give me my briefing, and every 8 a.m. ding, your briefing's ready.
Like a really good example, I think, John, for you is, so you basically live inside of our HubSpot instance. That is the software that basically, like, that's your world. I could see sort of creating some sort of a script that every morning, to Chris's point, here's my daily briefing of here's all the things, here's all the people I need to follow up with, here's who's ghosting me. Like, basically, like, it can deliver you your to-do list with the details and additional information, because you can do that in HubSpot. So it's like, why would you do that with Agentic? The addition is things that we've talked about on previous episodes, which again, you can get at trustinsights.ai/YouTube, go to the So What playlist. Um, Things like build me my daily next best action report based on who's on the list today, or, which of the people, how do I prioritize all of these based on who fits with our ICP the best? And I think it's bringing in that additional information where Agentic is more helpful versus just working within those systems, like a CRM system that doesn't have that additional context. And so I think for someone like you, if that was a road you want to go down, that would be the use case that you would probably find the most valuable.
Yep. Think about what would you hire a small agency to do for you? That's a use case for Agentic, as opposed to a single contractor, right? So if you were to say, I've got the Marketing Over Coffee website, I want more corporate sponsors, and I want corporate sponsors, I want sponsors sponsoring mid six figures for the show. You might say, okay, well, how are we going to do this, right? And that's where you would start putting together that 5P plan. Say our purpose is, I want to figure out how to get the Marketing Over Coffee to get mid six figure sponsorships. The people involved, obviously you as the podcast owner, obviously corporate sponsors and booking agents and stuff like that. And the audience too would be part of that. And of course, the different agents, you would have a sales and revenue agent, you would have a project management agent, you would have a marketing agent. And then your process would be, look at the site, see what's there, go and do some research to figure out what podcasts that do earn mid six figures per sponsorship earn, how do they do those things? How do they get those things? Build that research, and then build me a strategy, a tactical plan, and then an execution work plan to get to that point. The platform obviously is going to be like things like the website is WordPress, the hosting system is Libsyn. We don't currently integrate with any ad technologies, but like we were saying earlier, go do some research. What ad technologies should I have in place so that when that well-heeled sponsor comes in, you can say, I got a system ready to ship for you. And the performance is, initially, give me a plan that will work. And then ultimately, the performance is, wow, I'm surrounded in Benjamins. How'd that happen?
Chip offers the opinion, while agentic teams have big benefits, they also introduce greater risk of complicating projects without creating commensurate additional value. I hear you, but I also say this is why we're really hammering in that we want people to constrain their projects to the 5P framework. If you don't have this plan, don't start building things. So don't start building agents until you know what people you actually need. And with that, obviously generative AI is going to be like, I'm as helpful as possible. So you need, this person and this person and this person and this person. So it's going to give you a lot of information. You can push back and say, what is the bare minimum of people that I need in order to fulfill this? Or, get the 3 scenarios. What is the bare minimum? What is the mid-level? What is sort of like the gold deluxe edition? And that's one of the ways that you can get ahead of creating additional complexity, because and I think this was maybe on the podcast that we talked about, Chris, like
Yes.
it's going to suggest everything. It's going to say you could do all the things. You, the human with the human intervention, need to be the one saying, yeah, no, I don't actually need a level 1 and a 2 and a 3 information architect. I just need one who's sort of mid-level pretty good because I'm not building anything crazy. Like you, the human, still have to intervene with these plans that it's building. And I think that's one of the things that people tend to lose sight about when they're hearing all the exciting things that we can do with generative AI and agentic AI is like, guess what? You still got to oversee it. And you still have to be the person who at the end of the day says, no, don't do that.
Yeah, Katie, when you and I talked about this on the podcast, it was one of those, if you were hiring this as humans, would you hire a 100-person team to revamp the Marketing Over Coffee website? Absolutely not. Right? Would you hire a small boutique agency with maybe 5 or 6 people? Yeah, that's about seems like the right size. Maybe a larger agency, maybe a 10-person agency, because you might want to have some UI UX folks. You might want to have an audio engineer listen to the podcast to see if it's any good. You might want to have a WordPress expert, in to see if you've got the right tools and stuff. And also, if you are good at the orchestration part, which is what we saw in the platform in the 5 Ps, you don't have to have every agent on deck all the time. In the same way that when you're building a house, not everybody is there. The HVAC guys are not there while the scaffolding is going up, right? There's no reason for the HVAC guys to be there when you're hammering the frame together. So you have to think that through. And again, if you build, if you use the 5 Ps and just drop it into a chat, any of the tools will help you figure that out as part of the plan.
And if you don't know, and if it's suggesting a bunch of synthetic people with roles that you've never heard of, push back and say, what does this person bring to the table? Do I need this? How is this different from this? Or, can I get away with not using that person? And I think that that's really, Chris, what you've been trying to hammer home is get that plan squared away first before you're asking agentic AI to build anything.
Maybe in next week's show, we should maybe do a part 2 of this and really deploy an agentic swarm on the Marketing Over Coffee website so that we can have it build out a plan for John to become filthy rich as the host of Marketing Over Coffee.
What do you think,
using
John?
It may take more than a website revamp, but I'm definitely open to firing it up and see what it will do.
So that's what I mean is, why don't we build an agentic swarm that has like a business manager and a sales manager and a researcher, and take the entity as a whole. We'll have to gather all the pieces in advance. But I think there could be a there, especially if we do some deep research ahead of time to say, what are the other pieces of what data do we need to have in advance? Pull in the latest research from our friend Tom Webster. It sounds profitable. They have a lot of great industry research about what's going on with podcasts. Pull some of the data from Edison Research and Pew and all these places and say, how is it that some shows do much better than others? What's the difference? And then what can we learn from that? So maybe we'll do that as part 2.
I like it. All right. I think that's it.
That is it. That is it. So that is using the 5 Ps. Please try it out. Please use it. You will save yourself so much headache. I speak from personal experience. You will save yourself so much headache if you just use the 5 Ps and get good at project management. That's good for this episode. We will talk to you all next time. Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast and our weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.